Welcome to this webinar on behalf of Aberdeen City Child Protection Committee. My name is Kim Fraser. I'm a Children's Services Manager, a member of the Child Protection Committee, and I chair the Performance and Quality Assurance Subcommittee on behalf of the Child Protection Committee. It's the Performance and Quality Assurance Subcommittee who have oversight of audits such as this one on behalf of the CPC. By way of background, this audit was conducted through Aberdeen City's Quality Assurance Framework. This framework was agreed by Chief Officers, the Child Protection Committee and the Children's Services Board in early 2020. And although it forms part of many quality assurance, data analysis and self-evaluation activities which we undertake across our partnership, it's the first time that we've had an agreed programme of file auditing work across both the Child Protection Committee and the Children's Services Board. So the audit programme was just about to get going in April 2020 when along came coronavirus. So we put the first audit on hold until September 2020 to allow the development of electronic means to carry out this multi-agency audit. And notwithstanding the challenges at the time, we did it. And this audit is the first of the 2020-2021 Quality Assurance Framework Audit Programme. The findings of the joint inspection in 2019 and local and national case reviews had found that there was a variable use of the National Risk Framework tools and chronologies, both locally and around the country. These tools, you'll know, are found in the National Risk Framework to support the assessment of children and young people, which was rolled out by the Scottish Government in 2012. So this audit topic was agreed at the CPC to consider how well do we in Aberdeen City use the National Risk Framework tools in assessing risk for children and young people. Representatives from health, social work, police, education and the voluntary sector met through the digital platform of Microsoft Teams to review the selected cases. The tool used in the process was based on the Care Inspectorate Guide to Evaluating Services using their quality indicators, so it was drawing a parallel with the conduct of joint inspection activity across the country. Auditors were trained using the quality indicators, and in the course of the audit, all the files were treated confidentially, and the finalised report is completely anonymised. Now, many people contributed to making this happen, but on behalf of the CPC, I'd like to thank in particular Billy Nichol, who's the Quality Assurance Framework lead, and also the fantastic team of auditors from all the agencies who supported the audit and file reading. Billy is now going to take us through the audit and its findings in much more detail. And then Stuart Lamberton, who's the lead officer to the Child Protection Committee, will then let us know how the Child Protection Committee intends to respond. And then Hannah Bennett, who's our multi-agency Child Protection Learning and Development Coordinator, will let us know how we can expect these findings to be incorporated into our learning and ultimately into our practice. As illustrated by our lovely background behind me, all of these things are connected. So over to you, Billy, and to tell us how well do we use the National Risk Assessment Framework tools in assessing risk for children and young people in Aberdeen City.
Thanks, Kim. Thank you for introducing me, and I'm Billy Nichol, as Kim said, and I'm the Quality Assurance Framework lead across the city, working with Aberdeen City Council, but also supporting partners. And I'm just going to take you through a short presentation on what we've found in the audit about the National Risk Framework. So, as Kim said, the audit was set up to establish what tools are used in the assessment of risk in the city, how effectively people were using these tools, practitioners were using the tools, how well was the risk assessment tool recorded on the files, was there evidence of the use of the risk assessment tools in forming a child's plan, and finally, what impact did the consistent or inconsistent use of the risk assessment tool or tools have in planning for children across the partnership. The remit was written and cases were identified looking at children who'd been in the Child Protection Register on the 1st of January 2020 for at least half a year. So the cases were audited then between the period of the 1st of October 2018 and the 1st of July 2020. So quite a decent period to audit from. 15 files were looked at in pairs. We set the auditors up in pairs and we tried to mix up so that it wasn't just a single agency auditing a file. So if you had somebody from children's social work, they might be paired with a health person, or an education person might be paired with a police colleague. So we wanted to make sure it was a true multi-agency audit. The focus was on parts of the files which related to child protection and the risk assessment. And there was a near equal split of gender, covering the age groups as you can see on screen, 0 to 4, 5 to 10 and 11 to 17 years old. The files did include at least 2 sibling groups, and re-registered children were not part of this audit, nor were particular specialisms, because you might need a specialist risk assessment. So we tried to keep it simple and focused on the national risk framework. Very briefly, we used the Care Inspectorate methodology, as Kim has already said, and that's the 6-point scale, which you can see on screen. And then the audit training took place in September last year. The file reading was during the 2 weeks commencing the 28th of September. Then we had 2 discussion sessions. Normally you would have 1, but we needed 2 because the first session really was about looking at the technical aspect, this being the first time it had been done in Microsoft Teams. So there were a few glitches to iron out and quite a lot of learning came from that. But we do think it's a very secure way of doing an audit because private channels were set up so that only 2 people could see the files, and I think it was a real success and people actually enjoyed this way of working rather than having to go to a room with boxes of paper files and all the security implications from a more traditional way of auditing or inspecting files. So that discussion was held in October, and then with a discussion around the actual findings on the 4th of November. And then you can see on screen, I don't need to go through all the dates, but in December, the audit report was written and presented to the Child Protection Committee in December. So that has led to this presentation, and we're now going to look at some of the demographics and the findings of the audit. So this shows you the age range, and again, I don't need to read this out. Hopefully it makes sense just by reading on the screen. We looked at the ethnicity of the children's cases who were audited. You can see there they were predominantly recorded as white Scottish. And then we looked at disability, whether it had been recorded or not in the files, and 11 children had no disability. 2 children were recorded as having a disability, and then in a couple of cases it wasn't clear whether they had a disability or not. And I think it's important because part of the audit is also looking at how we record the demographics on a file, as well as the actual topic of the National Risk Assessment Framework. We had 8 female and 7 male children, and then we had 5 children were still on the register at the time of audit, 6 had been deregistered, and then 4 were looked after. So now we come to the results and the discussion of the audit. So I think when I was trying to work out how to present this, it was clear that there was such a range of tools being used that it was quite difficult to think of a way to look at this. So I simply made a table, and you can see there that the 15 cases, all cases had a chronology. Then different parts of tools and other tools were being used across the board. If you see that, you've got 3 resilience matrix, you've got 1 protective resistance related risk indicator. So just by looking at that, you can see that something needs to be done. We've recommended, and I'll go to the recommendations at the end, that we need to have some way of streamlining this so that there is a standardized set of tools. Because some of the feedback from colleagues out with the council, the children's social work, was that people maybe were saying they were using the same tool, but it was actually a slightly different version. People had tweaked it locally, and not shared that with people. So there is a need to standardise some of this, whether it be a matrix related to risk indicators, whether it's various types of risk assessment, as you can see listed there. We need to do some work on streamlining some of this, so it's easier for people to use and it's more consistent, and then it's better for actually planning work with a child. Then looking at the 3 stages of the risk assessment framework use, you've got stage 1, collection and collation of information, and you can see in this small table here that 10 cases were very good or good. So that is 67% of the cases, with another 27% being adequate. So pretty positive results for collection and collation of information. For the risk analysis, you can see there that 54% were good or very good, and then another 40% was adequate for the risk analysis, which is the second stage of the risk assessment. And then for the actual management of risk, again, quite a high positive outcome here, where you've got 66% of cases good or very good and another 27% adequate. There was just one case was weak across the whole findings, which is reassuring in some ways, but one too many, if you like, weak, but at least none were unsatisfactory or didn't have evidence. So it was a pretty positive finding. In summary, 66% of the cases had good or very good collection and collation, 66% had good or very good risk analysis, and then 54% of cases had good or very good risk management evidenced in the case files. Then the subsequent questions were, was there clear evidence of the use of the risk assessment tools to inform the child's plan? And we found that in 11 cases, which is 73%, the auditors found clear evidence of the use of the tools. In one case, this was recorded as moving from no to yes, and there had been a change of team for that child's case. And when it changed, it was a positive change, and it then became there was clear evidence for the use of the risk assessment tool. Clear links between the tool and the use of the risk assessment framework and the child's plan was found in 12 cases, so very much replicating the finding in the earlier slide. 12, there was evidence of links between the tool and the child's plan, with 3 not having clear links. So a little bit of work to be done there. Then areas of good practice highlighted, we asked for people to give us some examples of good practice. And I think in the majority of cases it was reported there was some evidence of this, with 3 cases being reported as having very good detailed chronologies. There was examples of really good assessment from partners pulling together protective factors with risks and the use of the resilience matrix, and that fed into the child's plan. So that was clear from the audit. This translated into clear actions within a child's plan. And then in one case, one of the auditors suggested it was actually an exemplar that if you removed some of the personal details, you could actually use it as a demonstration to train people in how to use the tools and how they should be recorded. So that was seen as very good practice. So finally, with another couple of questions looking at the extent that people noticed consistency in the use of these tools in planning for children across the partnership, not just single agency. So in 60% of the cases audited, there was evidence of consistency, which is encouraging. So obviously that means in 40% there was inconsistent use of the tools. The impact of that was that based on the findings, there was a lack of analysis or a single agency chronology, so it made a case more difficult to follow. And it also suggested it led to poor decision making for that child. So that's a negative that needs to be addressed. So really, in summary, key strengths in the majority of cases audited, there was good or very good practice in the use of the tools. None were marked as unsatisfactory, as I mentioned earlier, and none said there was no evidence in file. The linking of analysis of the risk using the tools to the child's plan was generally good or very good across the cases audited. There was evidence of effective partnership work and relevant information sharing across the multi-agency partners, and the audit team noted that overall there was a willingness to follow best practice across the partnership. All but one file was adequate or above, so some very key strengths there to report. Key areas for improvement was about the consistency of the use of the risk assessment framework across the multi-agencies, and that way there would be a persistent focus encouraged on the child, the family and their wider world. A standardised suite of risk assessment tools under the child protection banner with a user-friendly guide would help as well, and consistent utilisation of other available training would support the ongoing improvement on a multi-agency basis. And understanding the child's whole circumstances would be helped by using the technology. We've just found the use of Microsoft Teams really helpful, and we think that encouraging people to think about using that type of technology would help us look at the circumstances of the child as a holistic kind of picture. So the results of all this are that we have recommended to the Child Protection Committee that they share the findings from this audit in order to reinforce the consistent use of the National Risk Framework tools and progress a standardised suite of risk assessment tools under the Child Protection Committee banner with a user-friendly guide and accompanying multi-agency training, and then progress the adoption of appropriate technology across the partnership which supports the sharing of these National Risk Framework tools. I hope that's been clear enough for you. And to say how the Child Protection Committee are going to progress with these recommendations, I'm now going to hand you over to Stuart, who will introduce himself. Thank you.
Thank you, Billy, for that very informative and detailed presentation on this audit. My name is Stuart Lamberton and I'm the lead officer for Aberdeen City's Child Protection Committee. My role involves leading, coordinating and supporting the work of the CPC, and these audits underneath our quality assurance framework are very much part of that. Now, Kim has covered the background and context very well. An audit is often defined as an inspection of an organisation's files, but it's so much more than that. National learning from various organisations such as the Care Inspectorate, CPC Scotland, Scottish Government and various others across Scotland sometimes reflects that what we learn or identify does not regularly result in improvements being made. That is why the dissemination of this learning from our audits is so important. If the key learning points are not communicated, we then lose the opportunity to make the changes or improvements that are required. With that in mind, I want to share with you some of the next steps the CPC have decided to take based on the report and the findings highlighted by Billy. The first one is to disseminate learning citywide via a succinct video presentation rather than a written report or email traffic around organisations. This is to support feedback and engagement with the learning themes identified and allow staff and services to promote the sharing of this learning across their teams and networks, so we're all aware of the areas we can improve on and equally the areas where we demonstrate good practice. The second one is that the CPC will develop a standardised suite of risk assessment tools for all multi-agency staff to engage with and use where required. This task is already underway, and the suite of risk assessment tools will come with a short guide and be accompanied by multi-agency training offered by the CPC, which Hannah will talk about in the next few minutes. And the third area highlighted was to continue our digital development and ensure multi-agency staff have the access to the learning identified and shared as a result of the audits under our quality assurance framework. And as Billy's already highlighted, Microsoft Teams is a great example of that, and we've got to continue that journey. The emphasis in all of this is multi-agency. That's the key term. For child protection, we know the best approach to supporting and improving outcomes for our children, young people and their families here in Aberdeen City is through our multi-agency approach. That's where our strength lies. This audit was multi-agency. The Child Protection Committee is multi-agency. The sharing of this learning is multi-agency. And it's crucial that the embedding of this learning into our day-to-day practice is also multi-agency. I would encourage everyone to engage with this and pass any feedback through your line manager up to the CPC or get in touch with Billy and myself directly. I'm now going to hand over to Hannah, who will talk us through the training on offer and how this training is developed and adapted based on our learning.
Hi, my name's Hannah Bennett and I'm the Multi-Agency Child Protection Learning and Development Coordinator for the Child Protection Committee. I develop training based on learnings we get from case reviews and audits, and I'm responsible for supporting the implementation of learnings from this audit. To ensure consistent use of the National Risk Framework occurs across multi-agency partners, the Learning and Development Subcommittee will continue to encourage all staff working with children and young people to complete the GERFEC Introduction to Safeguarding e-module developed by Abelauer, which highlights the importance of using the National Practice Model and other tools associated with the National Risk Framework. Any practitioner wishing to complete other GERFEC courses provided by Abelauer must first complete the Introduction to Safeguarding e-module. By doing this, we ensure that everyone completing GERFEC training in the city is receiving the same initial knowledge on the importance of using GERFEC tools when risk assessing children and young people. The Learning and Development Subcommittee will also discuss the development and implementation of a standardised suite of risk assessment tools with a user-friendly guide and accompanying training for use across multi-agency partners, and decide how best to implement these standard tools as we move forward. We will let you know when these tools, the guide and the training are available, so look out for those in your inbox and on our Aberdeen Getting It Right website in the coming months. Remember that multi-agency child protection training is already available to professionals working with children and young people in Aberdeen City. Simply go to the Aberdeen Getting It Right website, click on Child Protection, then click on the Learning and Development page, and you'll find an interactive calendar breaking down training topics currently available to all staff. On behalf of Aberdeen City's Child Protection Committee, thank you for listening and joining us today.